Welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. We've got some tremendous news for you, but first, this item in the news. The United States Department of Energy, along with Intel, is building the biggest computer in the world, most powerful. They're going to spend $500 billion on this thing, and it will do calculations so fast, it will be a billion per second calculations. And this thing's going to take several acres to, of land to accommodate it.
And what's the purpose of it? How is it used?
I don't know. I don't think they do. They say, well, it'll make
that's a little
I'm serious.
scary.
I mean, it's kind of like, okay, you've got this thing. Now, what do you do with it? But they're going to find out about weapon efficiency. Well, that's great. And then they can probably find out about, they said they can find the cure for cancer or something, and they can find out where to operate on somebody. $500 billion. Wow.
And where is this being positioned? Where is
Well, I don't know for sure. It's being positioned out of Washington because they're using our tech.
Anyway.
Can you believe that? A billion calculations per second.
Well, we've yet to see all of what technology can do.
Well, I mean, I really don't know. But I'm sure what it'll do is confirm the fact that we don't have global warming. Well, speaking of the weather, last week's bomb cyclone winter storm brought historic, record-breaking flooding to Nebraska and other parts of the Midwest. Roads, bridges, and entire neighborhoods have been washed away, and at least 4 people have died.
Vice President Mike Pence is visiting Nebraska today to survey the flood damage and to offer comfort and help to people there. Gary Lane brings us the story.
For Americans living in parts of the Midwest, heavy winter snows have been followed by a major late winter storm and rising temperatures that brought historic floodwaters and disaster on them. Roads, bridges, and homes are washed away. Rescuers struggle against high winds, powerful waves, and strong currents just to get to stranded residents.
It's just unbelievable. I just never expected it to be this bad.
The worst hit, eastern Nebraska near Iowa and the Missouri River.
There goes the Mormon Canal Bridge right there. It just washed out.
The flooding is the worst in 3 decades, and it has devastated farmland and neighborhoods. By this morning, at least 3 people were dead, including an 80-year-old woman who was trapped inside her home.
They were telling everybody just grab what you can and get out.
Entire towns are cut off from the outside world. Floodwaters destroyed 500 homes in one county alone. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers reports 200 miles of levees have been compromised. Satellite imagery shows the Platte River before and during the flood, with the entire town of Pacific Junction underwater. The extent of the flooding can also be seen from these NASA photos. They're comparison images from March 20th of 2018 to March 16th, 2019. Here are normal levels of the Platte and Elkhorn rivers in 2018. And this week, with the Missouri and floodwaters extending all the way to Offutt Air Force Base, more than a mile away. In northwest Missouri, people in the city of Craig are filling sandbags to protect their homes and businesses as the river starts rising there.
We will do anything we can to keep this town dry.
During his Midwest visit, Vice President Pence will meet with the governors of Nebraska and Iowa. They'll discuss ways the federal government can help for now and later as these Midwest communities recover from this historic disaster. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Well, as they say, you ain't seen nothing yet. I think what's going to happen in California is going to be beyond imagination. When the snowpack in the Sierras begins to melt, and that won't be too long, it's going to be a historic flooding. And the Whittier Dam is in danger, and other levees might be breached, so it's a major catastrophe. What's happening in Nebraska is horrible, and to think that the head of that major Air Force, Offutt Air Force Base, that's where a lot of our strategic bombers are, and that thing going underwater is unbelievable. Well, in other news, the Mueller probe may be finally winding down, and a new poll shows that the public doesn't trust the investigation. John Jessup has that.
Thanks, Pat. A high-profile counterterrorism prosecutor has departed from Robert Mueller's office, according to Yahoo News. It may be another sign the investigation is winding down. And now a new USA Today Suffolk University poll finds public trust in Mueller has dropped. 50% agree with the president that he's been the victim of a witch hunt. 47% disagree. The public is also against impeaching the president. Only 28% support the House of Representatives seriously considering impeachment. And Americans give the economy high marks in another new poll. 71% say the nation's economy is in good shape in a CNN survey. That's the highest level since February 2001. 51% approve of the president's handling of the economy. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin won't support the Democrats' new Equality Act. Manchin thinks the measure should allow more local government decisions. Meanwhile, religious freedom advocates have been already sounding an alarm over the bill that Democrats say would ban discrimination based on sexual orientation. But as CBN's Abigail Robertson explains, opponents say the bill is anything but equal.
Males identifying as females using the women's locker room. Faith-based adoption and foster agencies required to place children with same-sex couples. And florists forced to fill orders for same-sex weddings. Critics tell me these are just a few of the potential results if the Equality Act becomes law.
Every American should be treated with dignity and respect, but our laws need to protect the constitutionally guaranteed rights that we have.
Greg Baylor in the Alliance Defending Freedom handled numerous religious liberty cases in states where laws like the Equality Act already exist.
Now, under the Equality Act, we will have a nationwide law, so we will see a proliferation of instances where Christians and others are being coerced to violate their beliefs in order to comply with such a law.
While introducing the bill, Democrat lawmakers talked about making the protection of same-sex individuals a priority over other constitutional freedoms.
We cannot allow claims of religious freedom to be used to discriminate against an LGBT individual.
It makes a difference when any level of government or any corporation says that this sort of discriminatory behavior and action is wrong. It makes a difference. And it provides those of us in our community, the LGBT community, with the tools that we need to fight back.
Baylor maintains the bill does much more than that.
One of the interesting things about the Equality Act, compared to the last version, is that it focuses in, it adds more to punish faith-based adoption and foster providers.
In requiring faith-based adoption agencies to place children with same-sex couples, sponsors argue the bill would increase the number of homes available to foster children. Baylor points out that forces these agencies to go against their religious beliefs.
Why is it necessary for the government to force faith-based adoption providers, like the New Hope Center that we represent in New York, to violate their convictions?
He also believes if this becomes law, we will see religious freedom cases popping up all over the country.
This is a frontal assault on religious liberty that we have not seen in the history of our nation. Not only does it contain no exemptions for religious organizations, for religious individuals, like many of these laws in the past have done, it actually strips us of our constitutionally protected rights.
The bill is expected to pass a Democrat-controlled House and even has a few Republican supporters. But as of now, the Senate is not expected to bring it to the floor this session. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Thanks, Abby. Pat, back to you.
You know, if you read the book of Romans, you find a time when the Bible says God gave them up, and he gave them up to unclean passions, women lusting for women and men lusting for women, for men like women. And this was the end of the decline against God. It was wherefore God gave them up to unnatural passions, the Bible says. And that's what's happening now. When you figure 1% of the population max is lesbian, maybe 2% max is homosexual. Now they've got this whole thing about gender transition, and we never had that before, and suddenly little boys decide they want to get to be girls, and they have these awful surgeries, and hormone treatments. And the next thing you know, the child says, wait a minute, I really want to still be a boy. And then they want men to go into women's bathrooms and into women's locker rooms. And then they want transgender women to compete against women in sporting events when really they're truly male. And the whole thing is chaotic. But this is what's happening in our country because we've lost sight of God. And the Bible says when there is no vision of God, the people perish. Now, you know, that thing, it doesn't mean vision of pie in the sky and some great work. It means when there's no revelation of God, the people perish, the people run amok. And we have gone to the point where God will give us up. That's what the Bible says. And this land so much needs, we are threatened by nuclear attack from Iran, from North Korea. We're threatened by cyber attacks from China and Russia. The whole world wants to destroy America. And it cannot succeed if the American people will hold on to their faith in God. And if we give it up voluntarily, then there's no hope for this nation against the enemies that are trying to destroy us. Well, to go along with what I'm saying, instead of it being something where the Supreme Court stands and says, well, the Constitution is defending this, the Supreme Court says, no, we're not going to hear a case. John's got that story.
That's right, Pat. The High Court has rejected an appeal in the case of a Hawaii bed and breakfast owner and left in place court rulings that found she violated the state's anti-discrimination law by refusing to rent a room to a lesbian couple in 2007 because of her religious beliefs. Phyllis Young owns Aloha Bed and Breakfast. Her attorney says she'll rent a bedroom to anyone, including LGBT people, but not to any romantic partners other than a husband and wife. Young's attorney said this kind of governmental coercion should disturb every freedom-loving American, no matter where you stand on marriage. Well, as the political and economic crisis in Venezuela has worsened, more than 10% of the population has fled the country, with about 1 million next door in Colombia. CBN's Operation Blessing has been working on the border between Venezuela and Colombia, and a bridge that serves as the crossing between the two countries. Diego Traverso is Operation Blessing's director for international relief. He took an OB team to Colombia to figure out where aid can have the biggest impact.
People is drinking water from the rivers, contaminated, polluted, and Operation Blessing has a lot of solutions, tools, and equipment to provide clean water to people here in Colombia.
OB is bringing water treatment, medicine, first aid, lights, and formula and vitamins for children. And Pat, a team of doctors and nurses from El Salvador also arrived this weekend.
It's in Cúcuta, Colombia, but it's all the way in Venezuela. It is a tragedy of major proportions, and the suffering of those people that is brought about because of socialism, because of a controlled economy that is now in the hands of the Cubans and also in the hands of the Russians and the Chinese. They want chaos in Venezuela. Once the wealthiest nation in Latin America, more oil than almost any other country on earth. Now it's in desperate condition. Now, Operation Blessing, of course, is down there helping. They need clean drinking water. We're providing that. They need medicine. They need vitamins for the children. And we have a team of doctors and nurses from El Salvador who arrived this weekend, and they're down to help them. Now, if you want to help in that terrible tragedy, our number is on the screen. It's Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund, and it's 1-800-700-7000, or you can visit cbn.com. But we're helping those suffering people, and believe me, there's great suffering. Now, the two largest nations in the Western Hemisphere are the United States and Brazil. And Brazil's new president, he's asked for religious leaders to come and pray with him. And I'm going to join my friend Reinhard Bonnke and some others to go to Blair House to meet this man and pray for him. John.
Well, Pat, Brazil's new president, as you just mentioned, will be here in Washington, D.C. He's visiting the U.S. in his first international bilateral meeting since taking office. He'll be meeting with President Trump. The two leaders are expected to discuss a wide range of issues, including trade, the crisis in Venezuela, and steps to strengthen relations between the two countries. The U.S. and Brazil are the two largest economies in the Western Hemisphere. Shortly after his Oval Office visit, Bolsonaro will sit down for an exclusive interview with CBN News' senior international correspondent George Thomas. You can see that interview tomorrow on the 700 Club. Well, drinking sugary drinks increases your chances of dying, especially from heart disease. That's the finding from Harvard researchers published in the American Heart Association's journal called Circulation. The study covered nearly 120,000 people over a period of decades and a list of their lifestyle habits, including how frequently they drank sugary beverages, such as sodas and other drinks, including sports drinks with sweeteners like high fructose corn syrup and sucrose. The study is the latest finding to suggest sugary drinks can lead to weight gain and potentially serious diseases, including some cancers. And Pat, that study says it's just 2 drinks a day that can increase that risk.
Well, we've been talking about that for years and years and years. And now, you know, the gut flora is so important, and the diet drinks will hurt the gut flora. And these diet preparations like Sweet and Low and things like that will also harm your gut flora. So the truth is, folks, we just ought to sweeten naturally, but the amount of sugar being consumed in America is one of the major causes of overweight, of diabetes, of type 2 diabetes, I might add, heart disease, stroke, kidney failure. You can go down the list. And we're suffering all these maladies, and we're spending an enormous amount of our GDP on health problems, and a lot of it is self-induced. But the thing that I am really concerned about is what the corn manufacturers insisted on getting in, is what's high fructose corn syrup, which is really worse for you than regular table sugar, but all of it is bad.